This is presented by the Durham County Library. My name is Larry Daniels, Adult Service Librarian for the Durham County Library, and I want to talk about a book I just read that I think that you all will enjoy, especially if you are a avid basketball fan. Uh, and by this time, this is March the 30th. We're still in March Madness. By the time get to see this video, will probably be somewhere past March Madness. But this book is, uh, I think this book transcends March Madness and basketball, especially if you are familiar with John Thompson Jr., who recently passed a few months ago. But if you are, like me, fan of basketball, familiar with basketball in the 80s and the 90s, you are familiar with John Thompson Jr., former head coach of the Georgetown Hoyas. His book discusses his life as growing up in Washington, D.C., where he went to Catholic school, played basketball, was recruited, and eventually went on to play for Providence College, which is located in Rhode Island. Then was drafted by the Boston Celtics by Red Auerbach. If you read the book, you would know that back in that day, that NBA teams worked as territorial, so that you could only draft a player that was within the region. So that's interesting. He met Red Auerbach uh, in Washington, D.C. as a young guy, and Red Auerbach suggested that he go to school within the area. So that's why he chose Providence. And you would know that during that time, John Thompson played for the Boston Celtics. He was sitting behind Bill Russell, all-time great Bill Russell. And if you read the book, he'll give you information. I mean, he'll give information about how there were rules in the NBA that you can't have so many black people on the court at the same time. So that's something that you could get into reading this book. I don't want to tell all of it, but I think this book, especially for those who know and looked up to John Thompson and familiar with his work and familiar with his career as the Georgetown's basketball team, people that were introduced to Georgetown from the TV, a lot of us, and I mean us as black men who watched Georgetown TV, we thought that Georgetown was a HBCU. And crazy as it sounds, a lot of us did. And knowing the history of Georgetown University, it's really ironic that we all would think that. And that's because, we saw him, especially in the 80s and the 90s, he had all black team and he was a black coach. So, and the famous kente cloth on the uniform, we would think that, yeah, that's a historically black college too. But this book is really great for those who look at John Thompson as other than a head coach. I read this book as if John Thompson Jr. was my grandfather, and he was giving us advice and telling us how it was coming up and something that we should look out for and something that we should adhere to, or any of the rumors that were around his program or around him, and how to conduct yourself with respect. And so I believe that this book could be helpful to anybody who want to take advice, who wants to gain advice from someone who's been through it, someone who's close to some of the people that we admire, like Allen Iverson, or like the Michael Jordans, or if we're into shoe contracts like Sonny Vaccaro. If you're not familiar with him, he was the one that helped put Nike on the map and helped with the endorsements of NBA players. So this book is great to get into. As you can see that right now, there's none available. So it's a very popular book. You want to ask us to order more, there's a link on our website, and I'll be happy to show you at some other time, or you can contact me at ldaniels@dconc.gov. That's ldaniels@dconc.gov. I could show you, or I could show you how to suggest the book title, or I could ask Collection Development to purchase an extra copy so that way it can continue to circulate. But I think that in my opinion, and that's my bias, because that's John Thompson Jr. is one of my role models. I think this book is one of the better books that has been written this year. The writer of the book is Jesse Williams. You can find his writing. He's a great writer. You can find his writing on The Undefeated. It's ESPN's magazine. I could show you. Not that. This not Jesse Williams, Jesse Washington. Excuse me. So let's look up Jesse Washington. He was the one that Jesse Washington, sports writer. So this is Jesse Washington. He writes for The Undefeated. You could get into most of the things that he write about. He has a great perspective, and I think that he did a tremendous job with John Thompson's voice. So get to know the writer, get to know the coach. If you have any questions, please contact me at ldaniels@dconc.gov. Let me hear what you think about the book. We want to discuss how we can make this book a part of your programs. If you are a nonprofit worker dealing with young adults who are trying to find a way, especially particularly young men who are trying to find guidance, some instruction. They want to hear another voice. I recommend this book. I recommend that you all include this in a book club. I think book clubs are very helpful, and especially with this, to try to get a different understanding of the man himself. He's no longer with us, but he did leave us a jewel that we can always go back to and get some sort of instructions of how things were and how we can overcome those things. So hit me up, let me know what you think, and talk to you soon.